Board of Education meeting will now come to order for MHS District 120 at Wednesday, August 4th at 6:30. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mellon.
Here.
Ponce.
The chest view thing. Zoom thing. Give you about 6 times more sauce than we need.
Ponce.
Is Ponce here? No, I don't think he will be here.
Second, Rastrelli here. Becky.
Here.
Wellington.
Here.
Boulder TJ May. Vote.
Here. Okay, the next thing we have are citizen comments. We have someone who'd like to speak forward. Board of Education welcomes citizen input. Citizens are reminded to limit their comments to 3 minutes. And also that matters regarding employees or confidential student matters will not be allowed, nor will the board respond. Kind of on the timer. Peter will hold this up when you're 1 minute.
I have timed this. It is exactly 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Okay.
Since I'm the only one, please. Thank you.
Ready, second.
As you know, my name is Lindsay. As you know, I'm a lifelong resident. I think all of you were here at the last time, so I don't need to reintroduce myself. I know I can't turn this mothership around. So I'm here today to make sure that you know there's support for the brave U-turn ahead of us if we need to make it. So first, this is about universal masking. I know we're headed there. I know that's happening. Okay. First, we masked kids to protect the vulnerable. Then we kept masking them because of the cases. Then we masked them according to the vaccination rate. Now we mask them because they can't or choose not to be vaccinated. All the while ignoring the detrimental consequences of masking developing in children and the mounting evidence that the vaccinated are perhaps contracting and spreading the virus at rates equal to or greater than the unvaccinated. MHS is home. Whether we agree or not, this is our community, and I will not ever abandon ship. I bravely stand before you in support of optional masking being brought back someday, no proof of vaccination ever, equal quarantine protocol for all students and staff. We must consider the vectors of harm moving forward into universal masking for the first time in a non-medical full-time school environment. Please be prepared for the following. Mock bacteria, especially for kids with poor diets, leading to sores and dental problems. Just ask your dentist about what he or she has seen in the office over the last year. The oral microbiome mixing with the ocular microbiome, leading to eye infections and styes. I know mine fogged up quite much, and I suffered from 2 myself, which lead to increased antibiotic use. Just ask your ophthalmologist. Skin rashes, sores caused by damp fabric. Just ask your dermatologist. Inattention, slips and falls. Inability to learn and concentrate due to the distraction of the masks. Well, I know a lot of you know that potential problem coming up. Germy, dirty masks that fall on the bathroom floors and absorb all the matter of other pathogens. Hello, increased fecal oral transmission.
You have 1 minute left.
Regardless of hand washing. Speech and cognitive development of young children. Prolonged mouth breathing leads to palatal, jaw, and dental malformations, which require SLPs like me to teach kids how to breathe through their noses once again. Excess carbon dioxide, not enough oxygen. Hypoxia is real. We all feel it after a prolonged mask usage. Any person who's changed the diapers of a child knows when you enclose a bacteria-rich area of the body and allow it to become damp and dirty over and over, you must be diligent about cleansing and applying that fresh covering every few hours. And that's for a system not as delicate as our face. The nose is a pathway to the brain, and covering it raises questions at least about what is traveling up to the pathway to the BBB, the blood-brain barrier. We deliver drugs and flu vaccine that way. Where will the Petri dish and our mask travel to? There are studies that prove the 0.03 micron COVID-19 is actually aerosol out of masks, creating an undetectable vapor that hangs in the air longer. With summer humidity levels dropping in the fall and winter, these microscopic particles, which a mask will never stop,
That's
and the
3
CDC
minutes.
knows this, will stay up in the air much longer thanks to the masks. I'm almost done. Nobody is talking about this study fact because the data is unfortunately being censored. I wish masking could save us. Maybe it will. Please be prepared for universal masking to contribute to unintended disastrous health outcomes and potential lawsuits. Be ready to make that U-turn if it presents itself. May all of you, our leaders, never rest in the pursuit of truth, no matter how bad the censorship and the cancel culture gets. I'm going to live and love like there's no tomorrow, breathe deeply, foster wellness and healing, fight for our American birthright against the obstruction of freedom, life, love, and the pursuit of happiness, We will and must rise above the echo chambers and fears. And always remember, with growth mindset, I know all of you are into that, me too, that MHS, that America, is home of the brave.
Lindsay.
Go Mustangs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for this upcoming school year. My kids are super jacked and so am I. So thanks.
Okay, are there any questions online that we see? No? Okay. All right, Aaron, you still out there? You hear us?
They just all went.
Yes, I can hear you.
They all went.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, just making sure. Feel free to jump in if there's any questions when we go through the rest here. The next thing is the consent agenda for the personnel report. Was there any questions on that? No. Okay. The next thing is the District 120 report. Opening days and
We need
you need
a motion for
Oh.
the consent agenda.
Sorry, I was going to do it. May we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Becky, a second.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll go through the roll. Homsay? Australia, yes. Wellington?
Yes.
Yes.
Oops.
Yes.
Mellon?
Do I go with you guys too?
Yes.
Mellon
Yes.
and Becky?
Yes.
Sorry. Got it.
Okay. Kevin, you ready?
We're ready.
All right.
Well, I'm just pulling up the slide, just a public service announcement. So Wednesday, August 11th is opening day at MHS. Laura will be speaking for an opening on behalf of the board. If you are able to attend, please let Anna know. They're going to have food available for staff to be getting for coming in, so as early as 7:30. And then the opening session shall start at 8:15. So if you know you can be there, you can let us know before you leave this evening. Or if you do need to check your calendars, please do so and let Anna know by the end of the week so that Anthony and his team can plan accordingly. Okay. All right. Tonight, we're coming to you with a plan that we originally put in place that was coming to you with common sense in mind and how to open up the school year. And as we have become oh so familiar with over the past year and a half, roughly, things change quickly. And this afternoon, I believe we're all aware, the governor did the announcement that all individuals in K-12 are required now to wear masks. So the presentation that was intended for the night, I have modified some of it because some of it doesn't apply right now. So as we go through some of these, you can certainly ask questions. I'll still share with you some of the ideas we had in going forward to be able to monitor our own data and to be able to make some local decisions in regards to when the mask requirements could be reduced or modified accordingly. So with that, Anna, will you take us to the first slide? So they just mentioned what we tried to do as soon as we started to receive updates from the CDC and IDPH was identify what were some of the guiding principles that we were going to stand on, knowing that things would be moving fast and rapid again. And we came down to those 4 guiding principles. We're trying to make sure we had a common sense approach, looking at things differently from different angles, knowing that all of us as adults and for our students would need to think differently with how we interact with each other in the classroom and outside the classroom on school grounds. Then when we got down to it, we started to say, what are some of the things we know we needed to have? And that was making sure we could get all of our students into the building. And then keeping them in the building was the next priority because we didn't need to see a constant revolving door through the guidelines that we have to follow, all public schools, in regard to contact tracing that is really directed through the Lake County Health Department. And then making sure we are doing everything we can to keep the experience as normal as possible for what our students experienced prior to pre-pandemic. So that if there are small groups or being able to work with manipulatives or being able to do lab experiments, those kinds of things we're wanting to be able to see still happen. And as we considered all that, what we also were thinking is how students and staff are transitioning back in. It's been almost 2 years since we've had 2,000 students at the high school. And we know from that presentation that we did in July, there's still a lot of concern, fear, different experiences families have had that we need to work through and make an adjustment time for that. So with that, we want to go back to what I think we did a very good job last year, was looking at science and using our mitigation numbers and working through those and reporting back. So that was the basis for what we were going to have in place until the most recent events. So next slide, what we ended up doing is going through making sure we understood what a close contact was, what an outbreak was considered, and if there was any exceptions to that. So when we looked at it, the CDC close contact definition stayed the same from what it was in the spring. There wasn't any difference to that really, except for it did quantify for an unvaccinated person at that time. But it still meant somebody that was within somebody, near somebody for 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. So that was one of the triggers, and that gets Lake County Health Department involved. So the next thing we look at is what is it considered if it goes further than that or if there's an exception. Next slide, Anna. So one of the things that came out that was different, and as we looked at this, was they did modify an exception for a close contact. And what's clearly stated in this piece from the CDC is regardless of vaccination status, if an individual is masked, and everybody's masked consistently and correctly, that the limitation to who's getting quarantined is limited to the individual that is experiencing those symptoms. That was a big trigger for us in saying there's a key to keeping students in school, because that was one of the goals, and that would have a big impact for us. The one part on this that I've been going over is that last bullet point. The exception is that it doesn't apply to teachers, staff, or other adults inside the classroom. I'm going through that latest FAQ that was released yesterday. I'm not seeing that verbiage in there right now. So it's something that we do need to follow up on. And it would make sense that it should apply to those individuals as well, whether they're vaccinated and they're wearing masks. So that does need to have confirmation. The other part that's in here with close contact that is a benefit that we sent out to the community and we would advocate for our families to do is be involved in the shield testing. We're going to have assessments or sign-up sheets going out. This is an opt-in. It's very important everybody hears this. It's an opt-in. We're not automatically saying everybody's doing this. We want our families to know what the test is, how it's going to be used, and seeing the advantages of it, potentially if they're with keeping the students in school. So the shield test is important because the other option is if there's somebody that's exposed and not experiencing symptoms, somebody can opt into the shield test. And what happens is they would get a BinaxNOW test, which is the rapid antigen test. That would identify if they have symptoms now or not, which would give an indication that yes, they do. They would need to quarantine, or no, they don't. They can stay. Now, what that does for that individual, it's the test to stay program. So essentially, it's the SHIELD program. The individual would need to test on days 1, 3, 5, and 7. And as long as they don't experience any symptoms and those tests keep coming back negative, that individual stays within the school building. So again, limiting the number of opportunities that person could be out in quarantine. So again, keeping the student or staff in the building. The other part of this we got to confirm is staff can also participate in the SHIELD program. So we are looking back into that to make sure that that is accurate. Yes.
Is that performed on site at the school?
So the SHIELD program right now, what we're planning on is it will be a third-party provider. They will come into the building and conduct the test. Building staff's working on how that would work. There'd be a set room for it. We're doing it to where it would be as least obstructive for the student, not wanting to out them, for lack of a better term, and meet the guidelines. So in order to take the test, the individuals have to have had at least 45 minutes gap between when they brush their teeth, drank water, or ate any food. So what they've suggested, other schools that have implemented this, is to do it before students go to lunch. because it's later in the day and typically going to lunch, so less of an interruption. So those two things combined are things that we found out that when you go back to the principles we had with keeping students in school, those were big factors for us in coming to that determination.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
So in terms of this, the last bullet point, that exception, what does that exactly mean? So if a teacher or other adult is within close contact of a student who becomes ill, then they would have to quarantine, but the other students wouldn't have to?
That's the way it reads.
Okay.
Because it doesn't say they're able to be part of this exception.
Okay.
And we're saying, help us understand why that would be.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So the latest FAQ, I'm not seeing that.
Right.
So hopefully that has been one of the
Okay.
modifications, but I don't know that for sure.
I of course have a question. So in the FAQ, where it says persons who are fully vaccinated remain asymptomatic, they don't have to quarantine, correct? And they don't have to do the lab testing. Right.
Correct.
That's a distinction. That's
Yes.
a significant distinction.
Yes. Okay. Good questions? Next slide. So the next part was knowing that we were going to be having a full building again, of wanting to make sure we understood what the definition of an outbreak meant. So if you recall last spring, what we knew was an outbreak was 5 occurrences, similar illness, common exposure. And what we wanted to make sure was being clear is, did that mean for the entire building, or was that based off a classroom? The challenging part we have for a 9-12 building, because the students move classroom to classroom, is the students move. So what the Lake County Health Department has explained is predominantly going to be based off the classroom. The challenge is going to be if you have multiple individuals going to the same classrooms, and if you're seeing that the case has originated from those individuals, that's where it's the case-by-case process that would take an account, meaning that group could potentially be put listed as an outbreak. It's significant if you get to 5. So if we got 3 individuals in separate classrooms, they show no connection to linking the virus to one another, it's not an outbreak if it's 5, even if it's 5. But if we had 5 students in an individual classroom, that would be considered an outbreak. So that's where they would then diagnose whether or not is it just that classroom that's going or more than that. But at least right now, the positive thing is it's not for the entire building. They're going to try to keep it as to a small scale as they possibly can.
So if there are 5 individuals who come down with similar illnesses, they would find if there was a commonality among them in terms of the space that they occupy?
Yeah, where it originated.
Okay. But they wouldn't all 5 have to be there at the same time. Like it could be 2 of them were there and then.
Well, it depends on how they go
Yeah.
through investigate it. And it's the duration of time that they're with too. So
Okay.
they could be single events. Meaning somebody contracted from somebody else at home, or they're out in another area where they start to see when did they start experiencing symptoms. They're really looking to see if it's something that's established within that space all those individuals are in. So even last year in the spring, even though most schools weren't fully open, the number of outbreaks in Illinois was really low. It's challenging to hit that threshold, but I think it's something that we need to be aware of just because we're going to have approximately 2,500 individuals in the building. And that's a large number of people.
Kevin, if that were to happen in a particular classroom, would that supersede the quarantine rules that you just went through and force kids in that class to quarantine?
That's my understanding, Aaron, because you've had a significant number all having the virus in the same space.
Okay.
Just so we're on the same page, I'm quantifying everything with an asterisk because it might change tomorrow. Before we leave this
It
meeting.
might be changing right now.
So just,
Yes.
That's where we are right now.
We like 13 iterations, it's everything.
We're trying to keep them simple here. So when we saw the guidelines that we have to follow or play by, essentially, when we're talking about working with our Lake County Health Department, those were the key 3 areas that we felt we needed to understand the best we could and how it impact if we had students or staff potentially having symptoms. So biggest defining pieces, we felt if we had masks, students and staff would be able to be in the building longer with less interruptions being quarantined. So the next part is like, okay, the common sense piece. Where are we with our local COVID transmission rates? Next slide, please. So much like we did last year when we had our mitigation group with the metrics, I went through and I was just looking at some of the numbers. So next slide. This is the guidelines that the CDC is using to determine whether or not the status level for the counties. And you can see the numbers there, 0 to 0.9 to 9.99 is low, 10 to 49.9 moderate, substantial, 50 to 99.9, and anything higher or more is high transmission. That number is based off the number of incidence rates per 100,000 for a 7-day period. Okay, so it's a shorter duration because the other positivity rate you're going to see, that's based off a 14-day rate for 100,000 per 100,000. So that's how they're differentiating it. So it's just the numbers that they're using differently. I don't know why they lowered it to the 7 or using the 7 number. But that's what they're using, and they is the Illinois Department of Health. I did look up what.
Kevin,
yes.
I know that we were that the metrics committee taught us this before, but I don't recall. How do we define community?
The community are the zip codes that District 120 serves.
Weighted by
yes
percentages of that zip code represented within the school.
Yep.
Okay, that's right. I remember that. Thank you.
Good question. With this one, the community, so the community transmission for us is just our zip codes. So yes. All right, next slide. So as we started the process, we were discussing it. We were middle of July, and we're looking at the numbers, and we were like, the numbers are as low as they've been. And if we can't get back now with those numbers, when will we? As we reflected on the process that we went through a year ago. So as things continue to progress, you can see, and I updated it from the sheet that I'd sent you, as of 8/2, that's where the numbers went per 100,000 for the 7-day total for the zip codes that we serve. So it's in the substantial area, which is still in a range where when we had the metrics, that was when we used to talk about whether we're going to be in school or not. So one of the things while we're here today talking about what we're going to be doing going into next year, we need to acknowledge we've moved miles. Last year, we were talking about whether or not to be in school. We're at the point now, even with the transmission rates and whatever we believe with the numbers, the discussion isn't about whether or not we're in school. It's really coming down to what are we going to do to mitigate some of the spread and really whether or not to wear a mask or not. So that's a big movement for all of us in the community and even as a country. So community transmission, really just wanting you to be able to see that's the trend. Next slide, please. So this is a very familiar chart for you. This was the chart from the CDC. This is the one that we were using to communicate with our community and everybody of where we were. So they knew that. We will be putting the metrics information back up on our webpage again. So people have access to it and the links to where to find the information. But I just wanted you to see, this is what will be going up on the chart. It's going to be updated weekly. So our community will have it. And essentially it's going over the same information I just shared with you. The key part really and what people will need to see, this is the summary of where we're at. And I want to reiterate, I think what we did really well last spring was we acknowledged we could be in the highest risk category, but if we're not seeing that in our building, that's okay. Meaning we weren't going to make any big shifts. We weren't just going to be basing what we did off of a number. And that would be what I echo that we still do going into the school year. It's looking at where we are and being able to identify some of the key data points that we're going to use to monitor where we're at, which I'll share with you at the end. Okay. So trends here. Next slide, please. So again, it mirrors really what you saw on the 7-day per 100,000, the overall community transmission. But if you look, we were really in the moderate to the lowest areas when we first started to have these discussions as a school district. And now they do continue to rise. So it is an upward trend that they're seeing. Okay, next slide. So before the governor made the announcement today, we actually went through for ourselves and said, what were some of the things that we need to make sure we can answer before we say if we were going to ask for masks to be universal or not. The CDC did provide guidance on that. I'm not going to read all of those for you because I expect you probably have read them. But when you read those 7 items, there's 3 on this slide and 4 on the next. There's really only one of them that we have an answer for, and a lot of them that we're still working through. One, we do have a population that is eligible to get the vaccination. I think a key part of that is finding out who is vaccinated, who's willing to share that. What I'd share with you is with the vaccination rates, when you look at our county, as of August 1st, 68% have had at least 1 dose of vaccine. 52.8% have had both doses. So if they had the Johnson & Johnson, it just went to the 1 dose. They're fully vaccinated, okay?
Kevin, are these adults or
It's
people over
everybody.
15?
So
Yeah, all
this is all. So this is all. So the next one,
But you don't want to know the 12 to 19.
so what they gave the percentage in is 12 and greater was 1 vaccination is 79.6 and fully is 61.8. And then 18 and greater is 81 for 1, 63 fully. Or what they have as vaccination numbers for the county. So we are supposed to be getting our zip code vaccination numbers. They're working on those. We may have those by the end of the week, but we should have them by next week. So those are coming through the efforts with the Lake County Health Department.
That's a question about that.
Sure.
Is there an effort among community agencies, schools included, to work with that information in a collaborative way? In other words, are the village halls, the school districts, the feeder districts, the community resources, our first responders, are there any type of kind of coordinated efforts to recognize where our zip codes are with their vaccination rates and what we can do as communities of those zip codes to improve those vaccination rates? Or is it just a bunch of bodies working separately?
Right now, I'd say we don't have enough of the information to be able to pinpoint those areas.
But I mean, is the mayor's office working with the school districts? Are the school districts working with the feeder districts? Are the, you know, we heard from the governor today about who's being mandated to get vaccines. You know, is there communication across agencies to be on the same page? Or is it when the superintendents meet with Lake County Health Department, it's the superintendents?
You got a lot of layers there, is what I'd share with you.
Okay,
so
I'll interpret that.
Well, here's what I can share. Here's what I've experienced. So from a village level, I can tell you that meet monthly with the village hall, work with the park district, and we're trying to coordinate efforts on any of the bigger issues that we've had. We haven't had our meeting since July 16th. We have one scheduled for the beginning of August. So I'm pretty confident that's a group that works well together, and we'll see what we can do. I can tell you, at least with the village, in regards to working with 12075, we've tried to coordinate when there's been opportunities to have the mobile vaccination bus come through and where they're at and how do we communicate that. From a school system standpoint, I would share superintendents get on and we try to talk about what we're doing, what's consistent, getting different ideas from one another. As far as drilling down and seeing what we can do to help with different vaccination status or something like that, most people are going off into each of their own districts and dealing or working with that the best way they can.
That's correct.
That's, next slide. So those are the last 4 for reasons to be able to mask. Again, you can see just in going through those, most of those difficult monitoring masks. And I think that's something we have to acknowledge with who's wearing them. You get a school full of 2,000 plus students. It's easier to monitor when our students are in the classroom. It's going to be harder to monitor when they're in the hallway. We know there's times there's going to be lunch period. Kids are going to have their mask off. They need to eat. We'll do our best we can to make sure social distancing is taking place, reinforcing that as best we can. We're opening up the lunch periods. Like we said, we're going to have some open campus for more students. So students will have those options to be able to spread out more. So we are trying to take the common sense approach in areas where we know things might be tight. Still giving our students and our staff the best experience and working environment that we can. So then the last part, it's the questions. I removed the slide about the 9/12 piece because we're originally coming here to say we're going to look to start off with masking for the first 4 weeks, monitor our data, and then decide where to go next. Since we don't have that right now, what I'm saying is when the opportunity presents itself, we're going to use the metrics data that we're going to be monitoring. So we're going to monitor the number of students like we did last year or staff that are having COVID-like symptoms that need to quarantine potentially, or end up having to test to stay. We'll end up identifying students in our staff that have actually had COVID by week and monitor that. We're going to keep monitoring the number of students and staff, percentages of that have had the vaccine. And then we're going to keep monitoring what our local transmission rates are. And then as guidance may modify, we'll continue to look at where we are numbers wise and be able to come back and say, okay, here's where we think would be a reasonable next step for us to take as a school district. But we will need direction from the governor's office before we're actually able to modify what we think we could do with the mask mandate. So one of the things that we'll see differently, we are asking our families, they're the ones responsible for sending their children to the school to please have a mask. And if they're not feeling well, stay home. We're not having that pre-screening check-in anymore where you take temperatures and you say no to all the questions or bring in the blue card. Our parents, our guardians need to be able to do that. The cleaning will still continue in the evenings. We still have the ultraviolet light that we're going to be using in the rooms. That will still be maintained. That's another one of the mitigation strategies recommended. And the fresh air percentages. We had established those last year in the spring. Those will continue on through this entire process as we go through it. So all those are the mitigations that we had in place will be in effect, except for that pre-screen. So
I wanted to ask a couple clarifying things about the shield testing.
Yes.
So you said that it's an opt-in thing. So of course everyone's going to get a letter home and then they have to somehow let you know that they're going to be. Are you looking for 100% if you add your druthers, and does that include staff?
So ideally, right, if we want to at least set a benchmark, I think we ideally would like to at least have all of our unvaccinated students, right? Because they're right now, according to CDC, highest at risk. And if there's somebody that was going to be going home quarantined, that individual would be one of the first that would go.
So if a student comes down with an illness and symptoms, goes to the nurse's office, then would they be tested automatically, whether there's an opt-in or not?
No, they'll be tested if the family has agreed to it.
Okay.
Because we felt it was important because it's a saliva test. It's not the nasal test, the shield test. We felt it was important because it's DNA. Parents need to know what that is and understand it before doing that. It would certainly be a lot easier from a logistical and point of view with our admin staff to just say everybody's in, but we didn't believe that was the right thing to do.
So I heard the governor today say that he would supply the test to any school district that wanted. Is this the test that they're supplying, the Shield, or is there something else?
Well, the Shield test is free to any school now.
Okay,
So I didn't see him reference it as being the Shield test.
no, I didn't either.
My
He said
assumption would be
masks.
maybe, huh?
I know he said he would supply masks.
He said masks. Oh,
I
he
know
didn't say that.
masks for sure. I don't remember hearing that. I know that Shield test.
Okay,
is
maybe I
free,
got it
but
wrong.
don't know that
Okay,
he
masks.
No, the Illinois
Okay.
State Board of Ed did come out and say they were gonna make sure all the testing was gonna be paid for.
Okay,
They did say that. I didn't see which test. I'm assuming it's going to be the same. So the federal money is what's supporting the Shield test.
okay,
So it only used to be available to the lowest tiered, meaning the schools that needed the most money last year. Now they've opened it up to any school district. So Andy Searle for District 120 has been working with the team. They've been talking with them. And that's how it's been set up through. And it's working through medical companies called Passport. So we're also working with that.
I just want to say, I think everyone agrees our goal was to have the students back in school. That was the number one thing, to have remote versus back in school was a world of difference for those students and for our staff who have to teach. So whatever the future brings, I'm very thankful that we found a way to not be discussing if we're going to be in school or not, that we will be in school. And just look forward positively. Hopefully everyone will wear the mask appropriately and the measures will do what they're supposed to do. And we'll see what the governor says.
Yeah, our students and staff were great last year. They really were. So, and Stacy's working on what we can do, like working with staff. Because if there's, again, common sense opportunities. If there's opportunities where we can go outside, your class can be held outside, they do that. You know, talking with Anthony, he's already talked with the teacher about, you got the next 2 months. Let's see what we can do with going outside, get creative, start thinking about where you can have your teaching done differently. So maybe create some more opportunities that students will be able to experience learning in a different environment. That would be even healthier than being in a concrete building. Yes, sir.
So less of a question, more of a discussion point. A few things. One is, I want to say thanks again, because a week and a half ago, I don't think any of us were expecting to have to see pivots and change plans. And I can already feel the emotions from last year kind of creeping in. But I think to your point, so thank you to your admin team and everybody at the school. I hope we don't lose perspective on where we are versus where we were, both in terms of the progress that you mentioned and the miles that we've made, but also the restrictions that we apply to our access and our way of doing things. These masks are absolutely terrible, perhaps necessary, but terrible. They are already causing emotions in us tonight when we walked in the door. And those emotions are valid emotions because we carry those with us when we go to bed at night and when we wake up in the morning. So I continue to be concerned about that social emotional piece of the kids as well as the staff, because it's not going to go away. In fact, it may perpetuate the issues. That being said, I appreciate the effort of the people who've done what they were supposed to do. And to hear the young students who said, why do we have to do this again? Because they did their mitigations. They busted their asses online and they found ways to get through it, and many with scars. And they shouldn't have had to, but they did. And now we're going through it again with one set of classes or one set of students who've not had some form of a mitigation imposed upon them during their high school career. And that's our seniors when they were freshmen. And it shouldn't be that way. I think the one thing we're missing is what every CDC recommendation starts with, which is the way we get rid of this is we work toward the vaccine and we work toward the mitigations. The vaccine is what gets it out of our system. The vaccine is what makes us safe. And I would love to see a more concentrated effort to work with our community, because I have an anticipated feeling that we're going to see numbers of vaccination in our communities and our zip codes that are not where they need to be. but I would love to see more of a concentrated effort to get those vaccine levels where they need to be in order to protect the students, because the students are the ones, yes, the older adults are more likely to get sick, more likely to get hospitalized, more likely to die. But our students are the ones who are having the consequences brought upon them, not by their choice, but by the choice of others. And they're not going to have the great celebrations in the fall like they would otherwise have because of the actions of the others. And they're the ones that are saying, what do you want us to do? You all told us last year what we were supposed to do, and we did it. And now we're back to where we were in terms of not having a normal high school start.
Can I jump in first?
Sure.
We all know they have the big vaccination clinic out at the fairgrounds, and they have it at walk-ins at many drugstores in the area. But they've gotten less as people weren't coming. So if people want to get vaccinated, is there a way we can help them, advise them, or not advise them, but tell them where that opportunity is if they want it? Because I feel like some families, you know, I know the second time I took my daughter out to the fairgrounds, it was closed. Like they had stopped doing it there. So then, you know, I've got the resources to look and say, okay, well, we can check these other places. But for families that, you know, need assistance in finding, okay, they've decided they've waited long enough, they feel like the benefits outweigh the risk, they want to get themselves or their children vaccinated, do we have a resource to help them find it?
So, do we have a
Or
resource?
do we have someone who can?
Yeah, like is there a weekly thing that says this is where you can get a vaccine in Mundelein today?
Just because like when they had the COVID testing, we advertised, okay, you can get your free test in high school from 8 to 4, come on down.
Right.
Yeah.
Just
So
so
we
that
are-
that information is available.
So we are working with Lake County Health Department. They've offered to do zip code pods for the mobile vaccination unit. So we will be doing those. We have been working with them during the summer to make sure that it is out at certain buildings. Like this weekend, it's at Carl Sanford for people to have. So one of the things we do, we work with the community coordinators from 120 and 75, Sol and George. Make sure we're reaching out to our community members. Peter's on it with the public relations piece. At this point, a lot of it is word of mouth, and it's having the discussions about the vaccine. People's got to be able to make that personal choice. And I think it's one of the things that I'd say from a school standpoint, we struggle with a little bit with how much of that information are we sharing out? Because then are we advocating for that to take place? And we do see the benefits of it, but as an organization, ultimately we've got to allow our families to be able to make that choice.
Peter, I agree with every single word that came out of your mouth. I think you worded that beautifully. I think the tricky part is the school is not a public health organization. And schools are often put in the position to be the leader for the community, right? But we're heading down a slippery slope if we're giving health advice or, you know, hey, this is available. You know, we're forwarding information to you, the public, from the health department. But I don't know that the school needs to be the originator of health information. And that is a sad thing also, because it's our kids who are going to be sweating in a mask the way I'm sweating in this mask right now when they did everything right. So it's just, we're back to the no right answer thing again. But I do think if there's a way that we can forward all the information about every vaccine that's available in Mundelein to families of Mundelein, hey, this is from the Lake County Health Department, but I don't know that it should originate from.
Well, that's what I'm
You know what
saying,
I
like
mean?
I wouldn't have
It's
known there was
really-
a Carl Sanford.
Right,
Like that,
yeah.
That's not something I would have known, so if you can,
Maybe in the weekly announcement, it could say.
yeah, like you said, we don't have to
Forward
say,
that.
But if that, you know.
So just to clarify,
Or if like,
I'm
when the,
not looking
yeah.
for us to be the disseminator of the information. I'm not looking for us to be the spokesperson for Illinois Department of Public Health and Lake County Health Department. I'm not.
only we could go.
I'm not.
No.
But I am saying that there's value in understanding our community's level of vaccination. And our community in terms of our zip codes, our students, our the people who are, you know, within the building. We should know if our students and our staff have been vaccinated. That doesn't mean they have to be vaccinated, but we should know what we're walking into. Those actions, the human behavior side of this is a big part of it for me. There's a chemistry part, a biology part, and a human behavior part. If we fail to recognize the human behavior part, we're just making guesses at some of these other parts. I hope that it works. We don't know what we're dealing with. And we're looking at metrics that come in on a community number. I mean, I saw the numbers populate today. And I saw what they were 17 days ago. It's absolutely appalling what the numbers are right now. And it should scare the heck out of everybody. And I was disappointed to hear the governor's announcement today. Terribly disappointed. Because I don't think our kids should have to wear these masks. Reality is we have no other choice. Unless we get ahead of this or get on top of it by doing the right things with protecting our kids and protecting our staff. I don't know how we do that if we don't have the information that tells us whether or not to protect.
If I could just jump in for a second, I just wanted to shift gears a little bit away from the talk of the vaccine specifically to just kind of looking back to where we were at the last board meeting. I think we would all agree we walked out of that meeting with sort of the most optimism and excitement we've had in a really long time that we might be able to get to some semblance of normalcy when we get back to school. And obviously with what's happened in the last 7 to 10 days, that has all changed dramatically. And I just want to acknowledge our administration because I know how hard they've been working with all of these changes. And I really loved the message you had at our last meeting about getting the kids in the school back to normal as much as we can, as much as possible. And I really just want to make sure that in light of this bad news, that we still keep that as the focus, that we get as much normalcy back in that building as we can. And as soon as we have opportunities to add more normalcy to the building, we do as quickly as possible. And we're just ready to make that pivot and that change back to more normalcy as soon as conditions allow us to do it.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that. And I'll take your normalcy. Because we have all the other things planned to try to address
the social,
the
emotional,
healing, like the reconnecting, all of those things. Those are still planned, right?
Right.
The connection pieces and energizing and all of that.
Yes.
And giving everyone that time to get back into what is the new normal for right now. And like you said, making those connections and having those resources available will be very helpful.
We're all going to mourn the fact that we're not headed back to where we had hoped to be at the pace we're hoping to. We're going to mourn it. Our kids are going to mourn it. And yet our role is to help them to be resilient and to show them what persistence looks like and to show them what changing and being flexible and trying new strategies look like, growth mindset. So that's what we do have control over now.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So maybe to end us on a positive note, Dr. Kroll, would you care to share some of the normal activities that we will anticipate seeing as we come into the start of the school year with freshmen and sophomores showing up and maybe like a pep rally? And
not to forget, we are starting school and we're all very excited that we're going to be in school. We have an assembly between first and second period on Thursday, the first day of school, out in the football stadium. And it was a great conversation today about how we're going to get people in there and what's going to happen. just great to be, and then just kind of mitigating the sound for our neighbors, making sure they know that it's a little loud, and they might have to close their window for an hour while they do business at home, but it'll be okay. And then Friday, the next day, again, between first and second period, we're gonna have an activity fair with all the activities and athletics out on the football field again, in the round and around the track.
Yeah.
And all the kids are gonna be out there for an hour. And if they want to go to those tables, great. If they want to sit in the middle of the football field and just talk, great. If they want to sit in the stands and talk, great. But that's just a community piece that we're gonna do. And they'll be able to go back out there at lunch where we're gonna be able to just serve them hot dogs and just hang out and eat out on the football field and enjoy that. The weather, because the weather is going to be fantastic. Staff are all going to be wearing bright neon colored shirts with 3 R's. We're going to be giving those out on Wednesday when staff get back. I have a surprise for our staff as well. I have a surprise activity. The first thing we're going to be doing on Wednesday is we're going to put together an activity. We have an activity that's going to promote the coming back to school, and the winning team gets a lot of great prizes from our local community. So if you are there, board members, the team that has a board member gets potentially more points for having a board member a part of their team.
No
so I'd love to have more of you there if possible. I know.
Friday, what time?
That'd be Wednesday morning next week. So just a start, but there's plenty more. I've been talking to the parent ambassadors, and we have some great things that we've been trying to orchestrate along the way too.
In addition to what you just described, there is also a freshman sophomore orientation.
Yes, Tuesday is freshman orientation, and the afternoon is sophomore building tours. Information by the end of the week. The freshman orientation has already gone out. Sophomore orientation is coming out this week. Just to remind them. Yes, so that's another great thing. And on Tuesday, we will actually have a vaccination event here in the West Lot during that freshman orientation. So we figured with more we call it traffic around the building, just having that event available that day right before school starts just is an offering. So that's there too. Wow, yeah, it's gonna be a busy week. And then Monday night is new transfer parent information night, where parents who haven't been a part of our community just come and hear the nuts and bolts. So that's actually being offered to our freshman and sophomore parents because they may not really know the ins and outs. And that just kind of, it's all logistical. Just, where do I get this? Is there an activity bus? How's that work? So that's that'll be audio tape or videotaped and then put online so people can see that they weren't able to come. So yeah, it's a full week.
Ooh, very exciting.
Yeah.
That's all we have.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further business to come before the board, the meeting stands adjourned at, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
There
you go.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye. 7:25.
7:25.
That's the hour of all time.
I said aye in case you didn't get me.